So next Shabbos, this coming Shabbos is going to be Rosh Chodesh, and it's a 2-day Rosh Chodesh Elul, and that means that it's the countdown. This is the time now. As much as people may say, I'm not prepared for this, and it's come too quickly, it is our reality. And Rosh Hashanah is coming, and that means that it's a very serious time of the year, and a very meaningful time of the year, and a very powerful time of the year. And we are invited, and we have the opportunity to weigh in and have influence over everything that is going to happen, please God, for us in the coming year. And I always joke about this, when the guy goes over to the Chazan after Yom Kippur, and he says to the Chazan, so how was Yom Kippur? And the Chazan says to him, ask me next year. That's how I can tell how last Yom Kippur was, is what happened during the course of this year. So this is the time of the year where we are invited to restructure our lives and to construct a new reality for ourselves for the next year. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity and a tremendous amount of responsibility. Let's talk for a moment about this responsibility, because I know when people hear that Elul is coming, when they see Elul on their calendar, people can, and it's quite likely, feel a sense of, oh my, this is overwhelming. There's so much responsibility. There's so much that we need to do, and perhaps there's not even that much time to do it in. So if you had to summarize what it is that's expected of us at this time of the year, you've heard this 1,000,001 times. It is all summarized in the abbreviation of the word Elul. That Elul stands for Ani ledoidi v'doidi li. That I have to make a move towards Hashem, and then there's a guarantee that Hashem gives us that if we make that move and we apply that effort, then Hashem will respond. So let's examine that for a moment. And there are many details. People will tell us that includes doing teshuvah. It includes extra davening. It includes additional Torah learning. It includes reaching out to other people in order to engage them, not only in a Jewish way, but to engage them in a humanitarian way, literally to reach out to other people and give them the things that they need. It's a time of additional tzedakah. So there is a fairly developed list of things that we're supposed to be doing at this time of the year in order to maximize the opportunity of Elul, and that's great. We're not going to drill down into that list. We're not going to talk about the specifics. Should be doing this. You need a 40-day program or a 50-day or 60-day program, whatever it is. Today we're going to focus on the overarching theme. The overarching theme is Ani ledoidi. I have to take responsibility. I have to make a move. I have to invest. I have to initiate. That's the energy of this time of the year. And then there's the guarantee of a response, v'doidi li, that Hashem will compensate us for having put in that effort and having created that effort, created that investment. But what we're going to focus on today is exactly this principle. Ani ledoidi, I am the one who reaches out to Hashem, and then v'doidi li. So there's a tremendous responsibility on our shoulders between the beginning of the month of Elul and, let's say, the end of Yom Kippur, or for that matter, the end of Simchas Torah. Okay? So we have responsibility. We have things that we're supposed to do. And if we're organized, as we should be, we should already start thinking about how am I going to use this month of Elul? Because it doesn't go by any slower than any of the other months of the year. So the same psychology that says, oh my, I can't believe that it's already Elul, is the same psychology that should tell us it's going to go by quickly. And if we don't necessarily have a plan in place, we won't necessarily have the opportunity to maximize what Elul is all about. And that's why I think people feel a little bit overwhelmed. So there's so much riding on me right now. Not only in terms of what's going to happen for the next year and whether I'll secure the blessings that I want for my life. It's even bigger than that. There's a sense of influence that we have in the community. There's a sense of global responsibility. It's all very big when you think about it. Ani ledoidi, I have to make this move. So before we get into the details and whether or not we're even going to discuss those details, I don't really want to discuss the details of what we should be doing during the course of Elul in this particular shir. But I think the big burning issue for us is, how can I feel confident to be up for the challenge? Because it's a big challenge. Ani ledoidi, I have to somehow reach out to Hashem. How am I up for the challenge? You know what's interesting about it? I feel that when a person is young and perhaps a little bit naive, so then we believe, I've got the power, I can speak and God will listen. We trust ourselves, we trust the system, We have this naive acceptance that as long as I do X and Y, like I will read extra Tehillim during Elul, and I will daven extra and give more tzedakah and learn more Torah. And when we're young, we have the luxury of feeling that that's fine, that's all I need, and everything's going to be fine. And then as time goes by and we go through the experience of life, we realize it's not always so straightforward. And it doesn't always work out exactly as we would have hoped. And sometimes we feel that we put in all that energy and that effort and we don't necessarily see the results. And that then leads us to question, do I actually know what I'm supposed to be doing? Because when we're young, it's easy to say, read extra Tehillim every day and life is going to be fine. Or learn more Torah and life's going to give more tzedakah and life's going to be fine. But as we get older, we realize that life is not so black and white and it's not so straightforward. And if we are to take responsibility, ani ledoidi, if I'm supposed to approach God, then I really need to know that I have the wherewithal to be able to do this. Not just the know-how. You could give me a list of things to do. I have to be confident that in doing those things, it could actually make a difference. So perhaps one of the biggest questions that we need to meditate on at this time of the year is, how do I know that I am empowered? How do I know that I have the capacity to actually get into this Elul mode and do it effectively and make a difference? And again, as we get older in life and we have more experience, probably one of the more honest introspections that we do is we realize, I'm not as amazing as I used to think I was. Some people have the opposite problem. Some people, as they get older, so they become more self-confident and more smug about themselves, and that's not a healthy place to be. But any person who's honest and looks around at the world and looks around at the dreams that they had and the achievements versus those dreams, any person who's honest about how much they know or how much impact they have on the world, eventually you reach a point you say, you know what? I don't know. I don't know if I'm actually that empowered. I don't know if I have that kind of strength within myself to really make a difference. Perhaps I've reached a point in my life where I want to work on acceptance, that there's certain things, and Hashem has decided that those things are part and parcel of my life, things I never dreamt of, things I never thought I would have to deal with. And now they're part and parcel of my life, and maybe I need to work on acceptance. Just simply accept that this is what Hashem wants for me. Instead of trying to shift things and make a major difference, whether it's with myself, I have to accept these are my failings, these are my shortcomings, this is my nature, these are the habits that I tend to follow. I need to accept these are the circumstances of my life, these are the challenges that Hashem has put into my life. Do I really have the strength, the ability to get up and to challenge it all and to change it all? And it's a fascinating thought, because if I don't believe that I have that power, then Elul can be a fairly depressing time. It's very much just about going through the motions, doing certain things, kind of making sure that I'm not worse off than I was in the previous year. But without that faith and that belief that I could really make a significant difference. Ani ledoidi, I'm going to reach out to Hashem. That's absolutely guaranteed. But is my ani ledoidi going to be strong enough to invoke a doidili, to invoke something in return, something meaningful in return, not just Hashem saying, okay, listen, you did what you were supposed to, I'll do what I'm supposed to. Will I get a meaningful response? You know, it's interesting, because there's a saying, they attribute the saying to Reb Chaim Volozhiner. He was a great scholar and a great Torah leader, and they say that he used to say, when I was young, I believed that I could change the world. And when I grew older, I hoped that I'd be able to change my community. And then I reached a point that I wished to be able to change my family, and now I've understood that the only one I can change is myself. And that's not a defeatist attitude. That's not surrender. That's not somebody saying, okay, I tried, it didn't work. That's a reality check. That's a person saying, let's be honest about the scope of our influence. So ani ledoidi, maybe years ago, ani ledoidi was, I'm going to get up and I'm going to work through my Elul and my Rosh Hashanah and my Yom Kippur, and as a result of my efforts, Hashem's going to change the entire world. And maybe we're at a point now where we say, I just hope that there's something in myself that I could change. Wherever we are on that spectrum, there is this one core fundamental question that we have to address, and that is, how can I have the confidence to go through this Elul process yet again? I can't believe it's another year later and I'm doing it yet again. How can I go with the confidence to believe that something will actually shift? That Hashem will gift me with something that is so meaningful. And I'm not just talking about, superficial brachos that a person says, please God, next year I'll have enough money because this year I struggled. Not that that's not important, but we're talking about real meaningful change. For doi dili, is Hashem like really going to come into my life in a meaningful way? Is something going to shift? Is there some spiritual blockade that's going to open up? Is there some achievement that I've never succeeded in that now I'll be able to conquer? Is there some paradigm shift that's going to happen in my life? So do we feel confident enough to do this ani ledoidi? Okay, that's the question we're going to address today, or at least to some extent, of course, based on a sikha, on a teaching of the Rebbe. But before we do that, it's probably important and valuable for us to understand the dynamics, the spiritual dynamics. How does this whole thing work? Because ultimately, it doesn't really make sense that people, humans, with all of our human frailties, should be able to do anything at all that should ever elicit any response from Hashem. Logically, it just doesn't seem to make sense. For simple logic. Simple logic is, we're finite, God is infinite. So, to put it into a ridiculous example, if theoretically you were to spend 6 months on the International Space Station, just for whatever reason, let's say that that's something you landed up doing, and you send a message down to your family to say, at exactly this time, the International Space Station is going to pass over our home. So look out in the sky, and you'll see that little flicking dot coming across the horizon, and that's me, and then, it's like the closest you'll get, in a sense, to seeing me in space. And so our family gets very excited, and they decide they're going to go out at that particular time, and they're going to wave. As the International Space Station comes flying over, they're going to wave. So we all acknowledge that that's very sweet and sentimental, but it's a completely useless exercise, because from that distance, from that altitude, nobody's going to see you wave. And whatever super telescopes they have on the International Space Station, not one of them is directed at your house, to your backyard, to see you wave. In other words, from that distance, from that height, as much as you care about the person who's back home, you simply can't see them. Now that is a finite, relative relationship, because the distance from here to the International Space Station at any time is measurable. So it's finite. So there's a finite connection between myself and the person orbiting on the space station. And in spite of the fact that there's a finite link between us, we can acknowledge that it's too far, too great, too distant for me to actually make any difference. So I could wave with both hands, I could hold a big sign, I could even light a fire in my backyard, and the likelihood is that the person on the International Space Station will not see it. So I could sit there telling myself I'm doing ani ledoidi. I'm reaching out to the astronaut on the space station, who might even be my relative, who might have even told me at which time they're going to be passing over. And all of my ani ledoidi will be futile, because at the end of the day, they're too elevated to see me. So if that's true about a person on Earth who's a finite person trying to reach out to a person in the International Space Station who's also a finite person, finite distance away, logically, there should be no scope for ani ledoidi and then v'doidili. It doesn't make any sense. Me, a human, a finite human, a pinprick on one pinprick in our Milky Way, that I should somehow be able to do something that is going to elicit the attention and response of infinite God. That is surely delusional. How can you even think that? It doesn't make any sense. So we need to understand the dynamics before we can explore this concept and what Elul is all about. We need to understand that dynamic. How is that possible? How is it even a suggestion that a human being should be able to do something that will stimulate a response from Hashem? The mystics give an explanation for it, and they say, Be'isarusa dilesato, isarusa dile'ela, that Hashem has devised a system. The system is that when there is some kind of an awakening that happens down here meaning in a finite reality, because remember, up and down are physical constructs, and they don't really have any application when we're talking about Hashem. So when we say up and down, we're talking about less finite and more finite, right? So if you're up, you're less restricted, and if you're down, you're very restricted. So down here means in our very confined, constrained human reality, if we create some kind of an awakening, some kind of a stimulation, which means we push ourselves to do something, we decide we're going to learn more Torah, do more mitzvahs, do teshuvah, pray to Hashem in a meaningful way, whatever it is. So be'isarusa dilasato, through the process of an awakening that happens from below, Hashem has devised a system, isarusa dilaela, that Hashem will respond. So we daven and Hashem will answer us. We do a mitzvah and we'll get a reward. We'll invest in the process of Elul, and Hashem, as a result of that, will give us X and Y for the coming year. That's the principle. Be'isarusa dilasato, isarusa dilaela. Now, we don't understand how that principle works. That's just a mystical teaching, that there is such a principle. But how does it work? And why does it work? That's what we need to understand. Because if we don't understand how it works, then it's difficult for us to accept that it exists. And if it's difficult for us to accept that it exists, then we are quite likely to fall into the most common trap of toxic thinking, aka the Yetzer Hara, the so-called evil inclination, which is effectively all self-destructive thinking. The most common form of destructive thinking is, I am not empowered. I cannot. I can't make a difference. I can't really change. I can't influence the course of the future. I can't have an effect on Hashem's running of the world. That sense of being disempowered is the single most destructive thought process humans are capable of. And that's why we've got to make sure that, that we don't go down that route. The misplaced sense of who am I? What am I? So we've got to understand, how does this work? How is it possible that a person does something down here in the physical realm, in the confines of the human experience, and that generates from Hashem a response? Now, it gets even more intriguing than that. Because we're told that when we do whatever it is that we're going to do, fill in the blanks, davening more, extra mitzvahs, more avas Yisrael, teshuvah, whatever it is that we're going to do, that Isarusa Dilasato is going to activate an Isarusa Dilela, a response from Hashem. It gets more intriguing because you would expect that the response that we get would be relative to the effort that we invest. Now, that's how it is in normal relationships, right? In an ordinary relationship, if a person is nice to us, we're inclined to be nice back to them. And it will be relative. So one person might be very polite to us, so we'll be polite in response. And somebody else might go out of their way for us and do things that really impress us, and then we'll go out of our way for them. So it's typical to have a relative relationship. The more that someone puts in, the more we will reciprocate, or vice versa. The more that we'll put in, the more somebody else will reciprocate to us. And that's what we expect, and the Gemara talks about it, and the Gemara calls it midah keneged midah, that Hashem judges his world and manages his world using a system which is all relative. So if a person behaves in a particular way, they can anticipate that they'll have a specific response from Hashem that is suited to the way in which they behaved. So that's what you'd expect. If, for whatever reason, we don't yet know exactly how it works, but if, for whatever reason, Hashem has devised a system that says, Isarusa Dilasato, you just have to do your part. You have to make your awakening. You have to make your investment. And then, Isarusa Dilaela, there'll be a response from Hashem on high. You have to expect, logically, that the response will be commensurate with the effort. So if I do a lot more davening this year than I did last year in Elul, then I can expect that, please God, I'll have more bracha this year than what I would have had last year. And if I just go through the motions this year, but I do go through the motions, so at least I do the things that I'm expected to do, then I can anticipate that the response from Hashem will be relative to, so to speak, almost like Hashem going through the motions. And we saw that alluded to in the parasha that we just read this past Shabbos, which includes the second paragraph of the Shema, which is part of what we read daily in our davening, where Hashem says, if you do what I want, I'll give you X types of blessings. And Rashi immediately points out that what does that mean? He says, Asitem ma she'aleichem, you did what you had to do. Esem ma she'alai, Hashem says, so therefore I'll do what I have to do. And the implication over there is that if you do what you have to do out of a sense of obligation, then Hashem will respond with a sense of obligation. And the insinuation there is that if you go beyond what is obligated and you really push yourself, then you can expect that Hashem will give a response that is beyond what you would have expected. So that's the system. Isarusa dilasata, our awakening from below. Ani ledoidi, I reach out towards Hashem. is, for whatever reason, designed to elicit v'doidili, that Hashem will respond. Perhaps one of the explanations that we could give for this is the Torah tells us Yaakov chevel nachalosoi, that the description of our relationship with Hashem, which is called an inheritance, is that it is compared to a rope. And the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, explains in Tanya that the nature of the rope is that if you could imagine that you've got a rope that is tied on two ends. On the one end, it's tied to one person, and on the other end, it's tied to another person. So whichever person tugs the rope, naturally the other person is impacted by that and quite likely will tug back. So in the same way, the Alter Rebbe explains that our neshama is this tether between us and Hashem, and sometimes Hashem will tug on the rope, and that's what we call isarusa dila'ela, that there's some kind of motivation or activation that comes from on high, and we'll feel suddenly out of the blue, oh my, I'm inspired. I don't know why, I don't know what pushed me, but suddenly I want to do something for my Judaism. So the rope's being tugged. And it works the other way too. If we pull on the rope, meaning to say that we do something, I reach out to Hashem, then doidili, Hashem is going to respond. And the magnificent thing about it is that he doesn't always respond exactly relative to what we have invested. And so sometimes for a relatively small amount of effort, we get a massive return on investment. So ani ledoidi, I have to reach out to Hashem, and I don't have to calculate v'doidili how Hashem is going to respond to me, because as long as I'm doing my level best, then I can anticipate that what I get in response from Hashem is going to be something absolutely magnificent. And that takes us right back to our core question. So there is a system. Hashem has created the system. The system allows us the opportunity, even though it doesn't rationally make sense, that we, with our limited capacity, should be able to have any meaning in Hashem's world. He's invited us on board, and He's given us the system. Ani ledoidi, we put in the effort, v'doidili, and Hashem is going to respond. And it all sounds good, except we still have that niggling, self-defeating thought process that says, how do I know that I am actually empowered? How do I know that I'm capable? How do I know that I'm going to get this right? Maybe I'm just going to go through the motions and completely fluff it. How can I feel confident that this year, 5782, going into the new Jewish year of 5783 on the secular calendar, 2022, how do I know that this year something's actually going to happen? And again, it's quite common for a person to say, well, in previous years it hasn't happened, so what is the likelihood that it will occur this year? So we've got to understand this better. Not simply just to say Hashem has devised a system called Ani ledoidi, and then He'll respond doidi li. You put in the effort, and I'll give you a response. We need to understand, where do we draw the strength from? And in order to do that, what we're going to look at is a very short but very insightful teaching from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe about the month of Elul, and specifically about Shabbos Mevorchim. So this past Shabbos was Shabbos Mevorchim, blessing the month of Elul. It's a unique year this year because Rosh Chodesh Elul will coincide with Shabbos. It's like a double energy. So we've just come from Shabbos Mevorchim Elul. And to be honest, when I got up in Shul this Shabbos and announced the new month, as we do every single month of the year, except before Tishrei, when we don't announce the new month. So I got up to announce the new month, and as we do, we say, Rosh Chodesh Elul B'Yom HaShabbos Kodesh. Start announcing it. And I literally got a chill down my spine. It's the month of Elul. It hits you. You feel, wow, we're back in the big league. This is the time that we've got to take advantage of. So I can't say that it happens every single year, but this year it happened. I got a chill down my spine. It's the month of Elul. And that's very much what the previous Rebbe describes. So in this particular talk, the previous Rebbe talks about what Shabbos Mevorchim Elul used to be like in the little town of Lubavitch, which is, of course, where the epicenter of Lubavitch/Chabad Hasidus was for a number of generations. Now, we're in the southern hemisphere, so our experience seasonally at this time of the year is very different to how it is in the northern hemisphere. The northern hemisphere, this is where you start to get the first hints of autumn. So for us, we're getting the first hints of spring. You can see some blossoms around. People have a bit of allergy as a result. And even this morning, when I got up to go to shul, it was the first time in months that there was that smell of moisture, almost like rain in the air. You can tell that we're headed towards the spring. So in the northern hemisphere, you can tell that we're headed towards the autumn, towards the colder time of the year. So the previous Rebbe says that in the town of Lubavitch, typically Shabbos Mevorchim Elul was still a day of a bright blue sky with a shining sun. In other words, he's implying that it was still summer. Now, of course, we're not used to how it is in the Northern Hemisphere. We take our weather for granted here in South Africa, where we've got this beautiful temperate climate, and even in the middle of winter, we have blue skies. So we forget that there are parts of the world where it can be gray and overcast for weeks, sometimes even months on end. So to describe the fact that the sky is still blue, he doesn't use that expression, but he says that it's still a bright day and the sun shining. The implication is that you still feel the energy of summer. Yet at the same time, he says the air began to change. On Shabbos Mevorchim Elul, the air began to change. And you could already smell the scents that are associated with the month of Elul, whatever those scents are. So here in the Southern Hemisphere, I could tell you could smell the jasmine at this time of the year. So I don't know what it would smell like in Lubavitch as it was moving to autumn, but obviously there were very distinct smells. And as we know, smell is a very profound sense, so it always evokes all kinds of emotion and memory. So he said you could smell the smells that are associated with Elul, and you begin to feel the breeze, the wind of Teshuvah blowing through the town. Now that's a beautiful metaphor, because obviously Elul is a time of Teshuvah, obviously. And obviously, as you're going into the colder time of the year, in the beginning of the autumn season, you're going to have wind. It's one thing actually that Johannesburg has in common with that part of the world, is that typically in Elul it's quite windy. And those winds are representative of the winds of change that Teshuvah is supposed to bring. So that's the description that the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, gives about the month of Elul. But you know what's intriguing about this whole story? You would expect, everything that I've just described, you would expect that to be contained in a talk that the previous Rebbe gave somewhere in the vicinity of the month of Elul. That's what you would expect. Either on the Shabbos of Shabbos Mevorchim, blessing the month of Elul, or the first Shabbos once you're in the month of Elul, or like this year where it's a coincidence of Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh. When did the previous Rebbe give this beautiful description of what shifted in the town of Lubavitch over Elul? In a talk on Pesach. Now, we know that people of that caliber, tzaddikim of that caliber, they don't say things just simply for poetic license or for dramatic effect, or because that's what happened to cross their mind on a particular day, so they decided they were going to share it on that day in case the opportunity didn't present itself again. Everything that a tzaddik says is precise, and the timing when a tzaddik shares something is very carefully chosen. The fact that the previous Rebbe chose to share an insight into what the shift of Elul is all about, dafka at the time of the Yom Tov of Pesach, is intriguing. It's not only intriguing, it's actually perplexing. Because if there's one time of the year that spiritually is the exact opposite energy of Elul, it's Nisan, the month of Pesach. Because Elul is ani ledoidi, I have to initiate. It's riding on me. I have to take the first step. And then if I do, and I apply effort, then doidi li, I can expect that Hashem will reciprocate. That is the foundational principle of Elul. Nothing starts until I start. Nisan and the holiday of Pesach is the exact opposite, and it's represented by another pasuk, also from the same part of Tanakh, just around the corner from this pasuk, that says, Doidi li vani loi. That my beloved, representing Hashem, reaches out to me, initiates contact, initiates a relationship, and that awakens me to respond. It is the exact opposite energy of Elul. Elul, everything hinges on whether or not I'm going to put in the effort. Pesach, nothing depends on my effort. And we know this historically, because we know when the Jews were in Egypt, in order for Hashem to take them out of Egypt, or let's say to choose to take them out of Egypt, he didn't wait for them to get their act together. At the time that Hashem appears to Moshe at the burning bush and then instructs him, okay, we're doing this now. We're taking the Jews out of Egypt. And not only are we taking them out of Egypt as some kind of emancipation of slaves, we're taking them so they should become the chosen nation who will receive the Torah at Sinai. That's the message in the burning bush. We're going to Sinai. We're going to key in to receive the Torah. When does Hashem say this message to Moshe? At a time in Jewish history where we know that the Jews had slipped to 49 out of 50 potential levels of impurity. And if they had crossed that threshold to level 50, that's a point of no return. They're as bad as it can get. They're in such a spiritually bad way that the angels argue with Hashem, why are you redeeming those people and not those people? Or subsequently, a week later, why are you drowning those people in the Red Sea and saving those people? They're both idolaters. That tells you something really clear. There's no ani ledoidi yet. They haven't done anything. They haven't put up their hand to volunteer. They haven't committed themselves. They haven't shown an investment in godliness and therefore elicited a response from Hashem. Hashem's taken this initiative totally of his own accord. So Pesach is a time to speak about how much Hashem loves us, how much Hashem is willing to do for us even when we are not ready and don't deserve it. Elul is a time where Hashem steps back like the more mature relationship of the parent who says, you're going to earn the opportunity to have this particular gift in your life. We've grown up. We're no longer the fledgling nation of the Exodus. We're now a well-established people on the face of the earth who can take responsibility for our own actions. And therefore Hashem's going to say, you know what, I'm going to wait. You, ani ledoidi, do your thing. And then, v'doidili, I'm going to respond. It's so odd that the Frierdiker Rebbe should talk about Elul and the whole energy of Elul during Pesach. It's so misplaced, apparently. It just doesn't seem to add up. But of course it's not misplaced, right? Rebbes don't make mistakes. It's highly intentional. And effectively what he wants to illustrate to us is the answer to our question. How do I know that I have the ability to do this Elul thing? How do I know that I'm strong enough to produce an ani ledoidi that will elicit a doidi li? I'm not sure. I know my shortcomings. I know my weaknesses. How am I to do this? And that's what the previous Rebbe wants to allude to in his beautiful description. He wasn't waxing lyrical. He wasn't trying to give us a picture of what Lubavitch looked like at the time. He's telling us the spiritual dynamic. The first thing you have to know is the day is still bright and the sun is still shining. That's the first thing you have to know. Because in our relationship with Hashem, frequently we know that we play the role of a reflective entity. That's why we follow the moon. Not only do we have a calendar that follows the moon, but the Gemara tells us that we are like the moon. Just as the moon reflects light, so do we reflect godliness. And Hashem is like the sun. Hashem is the source. Hashem is the origin of energy, of influence, and in this case of inspiration. So when the Frierdiker Rebbe says that it's already the month of Elul, but the sun is still shining, he's telling us something profound. He's not telling us that it's change of season and so it's a little bit of a mix and match. He's telling us that the energy is not that Hashem lets go and says, ani ledoidi. It's all up to you. I'm not making a move until you start getting your act together. Because that's often how we feel at this time of the year, which comes with so much responsibility and comes with such an overwhelming feeling of, will I be able to succeed? The message is the sun is still shining. Let's put it into different words. We know that there's a very well-known teaching from the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, where he gives what's become today the most popular parable to describe Elul. He says, Elul is the time where the king is in the field. Right? We've all heard that. We've heard it a million times, and most people don't even realize that it comes from a Chabad source. What does it mean that the king is in the field? Ordinarily, any other time of the year, the king is inaccessible to the public. The king is in his palace, or he goes on state visits, or whatever it is that he's doing. And if you want to come anywhere near, first of all, you have to have credentials. Secondly, you have to have an appointment. Then you have to go through security screens, etc. And eventually, you'll get your 2 minutes with the king. But you have to deserve it. When the king is in the field, which implies that the king is traveling, the king takes a whole different attitude. Public appearance, I'm available. Anybody who wants to come over, all you got to do is literally come over. In other words, Hashem is more present than ever. Now, isn't that fascinating? This is the month of ani ledoidi v'doidi li. This is the month of our effort, our input, our initiation. That's how we're told Elul works. Until we do something, nothing happens. But there's context. The context is the king is in the field. The sun is shining brightly. The energy and influence is there at this time of the year. Now the question is, do we avail ourselves of the opportunity? So the king's going through a particular section of wherever the people were out in the fields. The king is there. That does not guarantee that anybody's going to drop what they're doing and go see the king. It's unfortunate, but it's real. People miss opportunities when they present themselves. Anila doidi doesn't mean Hashem sits with folded arms and says, right, until you move, I'm not doing a thing. That's not how it works. Hashem first creates the opportunity, first sets the stage, first comes into our space. Once he's there and present, once the sun is shining brightly, then he says, "Nu, what are you going to do with it?" Now, the parable that the Alter Rebbe uses about the king being in the field is meant to describe the concept that at this time of the year, the month of Elul, is a time where the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, the 13 attributes of divine mercy, are at their highest levels. They're most accessible. Remember what that is? Hashem, Kel, Racham, V'chanun. Of course, they were introduced to the world at this time of the year after the golden calf, when Moshe was petitioning Hashem not to, God forbid, destroy the Jewish people. So that's when this was introduced to the world. It's no accident. It's not just because the story worked out that way. This is the energy of this time of the year. The energy of divine compassion. Compassion means I care about you. Compassion isn't I'm nice to you. If we stop our car at the side of the road and there happens to be a beggar over there and the beggar's asking for money and we pull out a coin and give it to the beggar, that's not compassion. We don't care about the person. We're moved to a gesture of kindness. We give them something, we then drive off and forget that they existed. Compassion means I care about you. I want to know who you are. What's going to help you? How will you succeed? I'm going into your field instead of looking from a distance from my palace. That's why the previous Rebbe tells us this teaching when it's Pesach time. Because he's trying to illustrate a point to us. Pesach doesn't only happen at one time of the calendar. God taking the initiative, God opening channels of opportunity for us is not limited only to the holiday of Pesach. That is the intense time of the year for divine initiative. That divine initiative then facilitates all kinds of divine initiative throughout the whole year, including the month of Elul. To put it differently, there's an expression where Hashem says, Mi hikdimani va'ashalem. Who preceded me that I owe them anything? In other words, what Hashem is saying is, and Rashi brings it as well, and it's based on a Gemara. If Hashem asks you to do the mitzvah of tzitzis, the implication is he's already given you wool to have a garment. Because if you didn't have a garment, you wouldn't have an obligation for tzitzis. If Hashem expects you to give a tithe to the poor, the implication is he's already given you money. Otherwise, what would you tithe from? Or from your field in those days where they used to leave the corn of the field, or the Truma and Maisa to the Kohen and to the Levi. They imply the fact that you've been given resources, and only then are you given an expectation of what to do with those resources. That's the axiom of Judaism. As we go into the month of Elul, it might be very tempting for a person to say, ooh, ani ledoidi. Hashem has a massive expectation of me right now. It's such a big expectation that it's actually overwhelming to me. I don't know how I'm going to do it. And that would be a self-defeating attitude. Common attitude, but self-defeating. The sun shines at the beginning of Elul. There's the king in the field during the month of Elul. The 13 attributes of divine mercy, which are the most transformative set of energies that exist, are available in the month of Elul. Even Elul is not completely independent of Pesach. It still draws on the Pesach kind of energy. Because Hashem never creates an expectation from us without first creating an opportunity to empower us. Ani Ledoidi, the month of Elul, as the previous Rebbe describes in that Sikha, it's supposed to be a time where the air changes. That's what's supposed to happen in Elul. The atmosphere should change. The atmosphere in our homes should change. The atmosphere in our communities should change. This is not just another month of the year. There's certain behaviors that perhaps we'll tolerate during the rest of the year. We won't tolerate them at this time of the year. The atmosphere has got to change. You know, a person could go for a period of time without living in their own home. They could go for a period of time without wearing their own clothes. A person can even go for a period of time without eating or drinking. But the air that we breathe, that's absolutely essential to who we are. So the Frierdiker Rebbe describes the air's got to change at this time of the year. That means something that is so ubiquitous, something that is so much part of our experience as the air that we breathe has to shift at this time of the year. So every one of us will have a different process or a different list of things that we feel that we need to do within the context of Torah and davening and tzedakah and teshuvah. So it will be quite personal. But the common theme is something's got to shift at this time of the year. And shift is something that frightens us. I don't know if I could shift. I don't know. I don't even know if I can shift for 1 month. Shift for the forever, that's totally overwhelming, and that's often what paralyzes us in trying to transform ourselves. But can I shift the atmosphere in my home? Can I shift the atmosphere in my head for 1 month? From Elul to Rosh Hashanah? Hashem says, yes, you can, because the sun is shining. Because the impetus, the resources are always provided before the expectation. So any time that a person looks themselves in the mirror and sees in that mirror somebody who is inadequate, that it would be a denial, God forbid, in a very subtle way of Hashem. Because Hashem doesn't create inadequate people. Yes, sometimes we misunderstand what we're supposed to be doing, and that's where we land up messing things up and not achieving our objectives. But if we can be honest enough with ourselves to say, this is what I should be doing. This is actually what Hashem expects of me. And if I'm not sure how to work that out, well, then I can ask somebody, what we call a mashpia, an individual who is wiser than I am and can afford to be objective and give me insight into myself. And from that, I could work out what I should be doing. But there's absolutely no question. Ani ledoidi, whatever Hashem expects of me for this year, 5782, going into 5783, for those 4 weeks of Elul to Rosh Hashanah, whatever it is that Hashem expects of me to do, ani ledoidi, that will open the causeways of bracha from Hashem, doidi li, that amazing things will happen for me in my life. Whatever is expected of me, He's already packed the resource bag for me. The sun shines. There's clarity. It's a bright day. There's Hashem's mercy at my fingertips. Hashem is with me in the field. And as soon as a person is willing to accept that Hashem really has our best interests at heart, wants us to succeed, is investing in our success, and it cares for our success, then we can truly achieve Ani Ledoidi, the things that are expected of us over the course of the month of Elul and leading into Tishrei. And please God, as a result of that, we get Doidi Li, the response from Hashem, not just for personal brachas, not just for family brachas, not just for communal brachas, but more importantly for the ultimate bracha, the bracha of Mashiach that shouldn't wait until we've gone through all the steps of Elul, but just as soon as we show a little bit of Ani Ledoidi, should already manifest that bracha with the coming of Mashiach now.